So here I have the iPhone XR in the white color, looks really good in the hand. It starts out at $749, which is right up there into 2017 flagship prices, but it's not a whole lot too different from the XS and the XS Max. So here are my thoughts on the iPhone XR and whether or not you should buy it. So right off the bat, it doesn't have quite the heft and the sturdiness of the XS, and the aluminum frame is definitely more slippery than the XS, but most people buying the XR are probably not coming from an iPhone X or a XS, so the aluminum will feel right at home. One benefit is that the aluminum doesn't chip nearly as easily as the stainless steel finish, but otherwise, it's pretty much an iPhone 8 Plus with thinner bezels. The size is really nice, it fits in right between the XS and the XS Max, and holding it with one hand is very comfortable. In fact, it holds a little bit better than the 10 in my opinion, but overall, it's a well-built phone with a familiar design and a really comfortable feel in the hand. The screen is one of the biggest differences from the XS and the XS Max, but it's nowhere near as bad as paper specs and critics may make you think. Like, imagine the 8 Plus screen, which is already really good, it's one of the best LCD panels out there, and then let's stretch it all the way to the edges and there's your XR. I mean, honestly, the real difference is the contrast. Colors are great, it's plenty bright, and overall image quality is fantastic, but the contrast just isn't the same as an OLED panel, and that's really what you're sacrificing here. But here's the thing, right? If you're upgrading from something like an iPhone 6, a 6S, 7, or even an 8 and 8 Plus, those are all LCD panels, and unless you're coming from a Samsung OLED panel, I think you're gonna like the screen. The speakers are really good, just like the XS and the XS Max. There's even less distortion at max volume compared to the iPhone X and 8, the bass is really nice and it's balanced really well. Obviously, still not dual front firing like the Pixel 3, but it's a huge upgrade from anything older than an iPhone 7. The hardware, the specs, and the performance is one area the XR does not sacrifice on, and it's a really quick phone. It's got the same A12 chip found on the XS and XS Max, it runs iOS 12, which is really fast and smooth, especially on older phones, and my iPhone X runs even smoother now than when it launched with iOS 11, so it runs really good now. And I'm expecting it to run just as fast in a year if my 10 is anything to go off of. As for storage, it starts off with 64 gigs with a 128 and 256 gig option, and what's great is the 128 gigabyte option only costs an extra $50 rather than an extra $100 like in the past. It's only got 3 gigabytes of RAM, whereas the XS and XS Max have 4 gigs, but honestly, RAM management has been really good on iOS 12. It'll easily hold 10 apps in memory, so I've got no complaints as far as real-world usage goes. 3D Touch kinda got nuked, but if you currently own a phone with 3D Touch and you want to know how it feels on the XR, simply disable 3D Touch in the settings and you'll know exactly where you can use haptic touch. I do miss it, but it's not a deal breaker for me because it still retains some functionality like holding the spacebar to get that trackpad. And it's even packing an almost 3000 mAh battery in there, an upgrade from the 2700 mAh on the iPhone 8 Plus, and it's definitely an all-day battery. Maybe a day and a half if you're going light, but my usage usually gets me one full day. That, along with fast charging and faster wireless charging, means I pretty much never run out of battery. Unfortunately, just like the 8, the 10, and the XS, Apple only gives you a slow 5-watt charger, so you're gonna need to buy a fast charger separately, but if you can find a good deal on Amazon, I definitely recommend it. Like, fast charging has definitely saved me on numerous occasions when I was at low battery and had to leave for an event in like 20 minutes. Otherwise, yeah, really solid battery life and about on par with something like the Samsung Galaxy S9. The camera on the XR is really good, and the sacrifices that it makes are totally reasonable. So no more telephoto lens, but you still get portrait mode on both the rear and front-facing camera, only now you can do portrait mode with the wide-angle lens, so you have a lot more room for creativity and getting different perspectives. Although you do lose the stage light effect, but honestly, it's kinda silly and I pretty much never use it, so I'm totally fine with that. It still keeps Smart HDR, can still record HDR in 4K 30 FPS, still records stereo audio, 4K 60 FPS, 1080p 240 FPS low motion. It still has everything you'd expect, and really, you're not sacrificing anything that important by not having that telephoto lens. Like, you're still getting the same great image processing on the XS, the accurate colors, the more aggressive HDR, and I specifically tested this, but there's no smoothing on the XR even indoors. I think for a lot of people, there's really no difference between the XR camera and the XS camera, so it gets a solid 9 out of 10, only because I found the selfie camera to be more zoomed than the previous 10. Okay, so those are all the new upgrades with the 10R and what you lose versus the 10S and the 10S Max. So here's who I think should buy it and which color to get. I get a surprising number of these comments, believe it or not. So if you're coming from an iPhone 10, no. If you're coming from an iPhone 8 or 8 Plus, biggest differences are the camera and the bigger screen. It's got the same aluminum and glass build, the stereo speakers, the LCD panel, otherwise a very familiar phone even in performance. If you got an iPhone 7 or 7 Plus, this is a pretty big upgrade. I would personally hold off one more year if your phone still works, but the bigger screen, the louder and clearer speakers, the much better camera, and fast charging are all standout upgrades. And if you got anything older than that, it's so much better in every aspect, and I would definitely recommend the 10R. Now, as for which color to get, there's pretty much 3 options. So get white if you use your phone naked because it hides fingerprints and smudges really well. Get the space gray option if you want the frame to blend in with the bezels. Honestly, it's not much of a distraction for me, but it is more visually appealing to have the bezels blend in with the frame. Or the third option, just pick your favorite color. So that's my review of the iPhone XR. I really hope you enjoyed it and I hope you found it helpful, and I will see you guys next time.